Hello and welcome to the latest instalment of the Empire of the Cop podcast. We've got another entry from the Anfield Rap, the very lovely Craig Hannan. Craig, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
No, our pleasure. And as usual, of course, we've got Peter Kenny-Jones and I'll be your host, Farrell Keeling. I'm just going to kick things off right off the bat again with the Jürgen Klopp documentary. We were last discussing it. I think we were both sort of in awe of the level of work that had gone into it. And obviously, it's great to see that, you lads have been really sort of careful with it. You don't want to just lump it all out at once. It's a very sort of careful, a very loving process. I think everyone can sort of summarize on it. I just want to get your thoughts on what's the latest on the documentary, because obviously I think you've got parts 1 to 3, if I'm right in understanding, currently out, and then a few more to come.
We've got so we released part 1 for free, and then parts 2 and 3 went out behind the paywall. It went on the Anfield Rap app. We've got in March parts 2 and 3 going out for free on YouTube. I think it'll be the international break in March, and then parts 4 and 5 will also be released then as well. So, no, thanks for the kind words. Honestly, we're so excited about it. When we were talking about doing the project a year ago, one of the things that we said from the off was that there's no cut corners, there's no Zoom calls. There's this is to be done as if it's for Netflix. That's how we treated it from the start. And in the end, the lads got 35 interviews. We're filmed across 4 countries. The scale of the project just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And the reaction to it online has just been incredible. I don't know if Neil spoke about this last time, but the premise of the documentary from the very beginning was, if Jürgen Klopp was going to produce a documentary about himself, how would he do it? He'd tell the story of the people and places that helped shape and mold him. And so we used that as a value. We used that so that everything we did was with Jürgen Klopp in mind. Erdinger was a partner that we brought on for the project, and he's an ambassador for Erdinger. Even until every small detail about this documentary was making sure that it was something that we'd hope that Jürgen might himself enjoy and hopefully watch. And I think I'm allowed to say this. We heard that Jürgen had watched it. We got a really, really nice message from him that he'd loved it. So that just as football fans, we can give all the reasons why we do something like this. We wanted the main one really was to sort of set a new benchmark for what fan-led media can be sort of expected of in terms of filmmaking, storytelling, and the marketing around it. But really, as Liverpool fans, the reason why you do something like this, it became a love letter to Jürgen Klopp, and so the reason why we did this was so that fingers crossed Jürgen would like it, and we've heard he has. So yeah, we've got loads of plans for the next parts. We've got a really, really exciting interview, so we'll have new faces on parts 4 and 5. Just to freshen up. We'll see some of the favourites from the first 3, but I'm not allowed to say who the interview is, but we've got an interview who the Anfield Rap have never interviewed before properly and have been trying to get for 5 years. So that's all I'm saying. Don't guess.
Bill Shankly.
It's a hologram. Yeah, no, no guesses, because I can't lie and then I'll give it away and I'm not allowed. So yeah, we're really excited. We want to make sure that the 4 and 5 is that's episode 4 is about winning, and so it's all the enjoyable moments, the European Cup, the league, winning the league with Dortmund, promotion with Mainz. It's all the historic moments. So we're really excited about it.
Oh yeah, well, obviously I'll just echo what Farrell said. Obviously we both really enjoyed it, and obviously speaking with you before, it's clear the effort you put in. And we had Paul from Redmen TV on last week, and obviously the stuff that they're doing as well. They've done the debut stuff. It's just amazing to see what fan culture can do now. Obviously, it just goes from Red all over the land are probably the first ones that we'll all remember, and it's gone from you handed a magazine out to now, as you say, making Netflix quality documentaries. It's great to see. So well done to you. And yeah, obviously we will go back to the Klopp documentary at the end, but while we're here, we may as well talk about Liverpool if that's okay. And it's not going great at the moment. We drew with Chelsea. Obviously, it was 2 clean sheets in 2 games. We're sorting ourselves out at the back a bit. Hopefully, the goals will start coming soon. But just if I can put you on the spot with quite a general question, just what do you think has maybe gone wrong or not going as well as it was last season? If I had to put it on you, sorry.
Oh, what a question.
Either that or tell us who the interviewers you pick.
Okay, I'll answer this one. I think everyone can sort of see, and I honestly feel this in the fan base as well. Like within Anfield, I think you can feel it as well. That there's definitely a hangover from what happened last season. Whether that's a hangover from coming so close again, whether it's a hangover from the European Cup final, what happens on the pitch, what happens off the pitch in Paris. There's certainly a hangover. I think a lot of this, and I thought it was interesting. Thiago talked in the week about how this was a mental thing and not physical. That it's not the legs, it's in the head. And Pep Linder's book is cited a lot, and I read it. And one of the things that really sort of one of the things I realised was a lot of what they did last year in terms of Liverpool clawing back that. Clawing City back down and it going to the last day of the season in the league was that they had a story to tell. There was like a narrative within the first team, and it was like they had this mission, is what they kept talking about, and that this mission was what they were aiming for. That they had these cups that they were going after, and they had this squad that was able to deal with going after these cups. But the mission was that as City were to drop points, Liverpool would gain points and you really feel that in the book as it built and built and built towards the end of the season that there was like a feeling that they were going to do it. And obviously they don't. And they win the 2 cups, but they don't get the 2 big shiny ones. And I honestly feel like off the back of what happened in 18-19, where they miss out, off the back of, just how many times Liverpool have put everything in with no margin for error, and they've come close and not been able to do it. And so I think there's a hangover there. I think as well, I think what Liverpool have tried to do, the coaching staff, they've tried to transition. You can see changes that were made at the beginning of the season where, whether that was for Darwin Núñez coming in, losing Mane, you could see changes in the system that didn't really look like Liverpool. Like Salah was very wide. The midfield changes where Elliott's been in there rather than sort of 3 workhorses. And you can see that we always said that it felt like Liverpool at their best, every player was a cog in the machine. And when one cog was just out of line, it didn't quite happen for them. And what we've seen this season is so many of the cogs, are not working in tandem with each other. I think I've gone on for quite a long time now. There are plenty of other problems. We should have recruited in the summer. We should have been recruiting for midfield before that, and having this planning that's not just contingency but is looking forward. That should have been done, and instead we've relied on the same people that we've been relying on for season after season, and it's maybe just got to the point where it's been one sort of season too far for a few of them.
I mean, we're going to get to more of the specifics re Chelsea and the positional calls with the forward line. But I just want to go off something that you said there, because you mentioned a couple of very interesting things. You also mentioned, the hurt from 18-19, the hurt from the prior season. This Liverpool squad, has been labelled mentality monsters. It has got to the top of the mountain on so many occasions. We've not come away completely silverware-less. But, there's been a number of, I suppose you'd call, missed opportunities, and you mentioned the mental impact of that there. And I think, you look at, you can make an argument for certain players and go, right, they're in their 30s, they're approaching, they're over the hill physically. But you look at players like sort of Fabinho, he's under 30, and you think realistically, your career should still be at a high. But I suppose the question is, when you look at players like that, players like Anderson, players like Fabinho, is it the case it's been one too many mountains to climb now? Are we ever, do you think, going to see the best, I suppose, particularly from Fabinho, who still really should have the legs to function at a high level and in this Liverpool team? Are we ever going to see his best again? Or have we reached a point? I know that's quite a loaded question. But it's a lot. We're dumping a lot on you in this podcast. But I suppose, in your opinion, do you feel that it has been one too many mountains for these players, and it is the case that we're not really going to see their best again in a Liverpool shirt?
I wouldn't say that we won't see the best again in the Liverpool shirt. I think that, I think there's a thing where Jürgen Klopp's best football teams have always been full of players that he's recruited who still have it all to do, And what I mean by that is he often signed players who he saw had a particular mentality. You know, we talked about, you know, signing captains, you know, Salah, Mane, captains of their country. You know, they have a country on their shoulders. The things that they'd done through their sort of childhood and their early adult life to become a footballer, the hurdles they've overcome in their own lives. You know, Andy Robertson. You know, there's all these stories of Liverpool players whenever they've recruited them saying that this is the kind of mentality that we want. But also there was also like a factor, a defining factor of all of these players whenever we brought them in, that they'd not really won much. Like they were players who were hungry and who, you know, had it all ahead of themselves, and who, you know, Salah had something to prove in the Premier League, and, you know, they all had something to prove. They all had something to win. You know, even the likes of Virgil van Dijk. Virgil van Dijk comes in at 27, but he's really only won like a Scottish title or two and a cup. You know, these aren't like, he hadn't done it on the big stage. He hadn't won the big things, and now we've got a team full of the players that have been there and done it. And I just wonder whether whether we've needed more reinforcements and more fresh faces, and more, maybe for one of them to be sold, and for us to bring in sort of a couple of, you know, much younger. I think one of the problems Liverpool have at the moment is there's a big gap there in players who are in the age bracket of 22 to 28. Like there's very few of them, and the ones that we have are injured, Diaz and Jota. So I think all of this is a problem. In terms of a player like Fabinho, and Fabinho not being or being finished and not being able to reach the level, I don't think that's the case. I think when systemically we're having the problems that we're having, it just brings out all of the negatives in each player, and it makes it much more difficult. Fabinho always had Wijnaldum and Henderson, but Henderson from 3 years ago in front of him. You know, he always had runners. He had Henderson. He was able to drop in at right back and help Trent when Trent was bursting forward. He had legs around him, and I think if you had two players like that around Fabinho, it makes it a lot more easy for him. I think when, at the moment, we're looking at our midfield and we're saying, right, Chelsea, well, we're happy that Bajcetic and Keita start again because of Wolves, and we have to reset, and I thought that was the right decision. But if we were to bring in Fabinho, then does Bajcetic go ahead of him, and then is it Keita? But Keita's like, you know, Keita's a polarizing figure. He's not one that you can trust week in, week out. I think there's a lot of problems that they've left themselves to solve based on maybe poor planning over the past sort of 12 months.
Yeah, well, obviously there has been a lot of change in the team. I was saying to my dad, who were watching the match together, stood in the copper, I said, if he'd have told us last year at this point that we'd have had the front three, which wouldn't have had Mane, wouldn't have had Diaz when he come in, wouldn't have had Firmino, and we were quite happy to see it when Núñez came on, and it was Núñez, Gakpo and Salah. It's mad the change that we've got. And again, you say Bajcetic is playing, he's 18 years old, and we're happy with it at the moment. It's just like, it's such a shift in what's happened in less than a year, and it's obviously just, it's strange to say. I don't think anyone really has the answers, because I think we'll all agree that Jürgen Klopp knows more than most of Anfield put together, and he doesn't seem to be able to put his finger on what is to sort at the moment. But obviously we all have faith he will. But you just touched on their injuries, and I think the front three at the moment is something that's quite interesting as well, because we've seen Chamberlain fill in for the fact that obviously we've had Diaz, Jota and Firmino out. Obviously Núñez was out before that. We've seen Oxlade-Chamberlain, now he's playing Elliott as part of a front three, and Gakpo's played 4 games, 2 through the middle, 2 out wide. Núñez comes on, he's on the left, he's been playing through the middle. It feels like he doesn't quite know where to put the newest players or where their best position is in the front three. So just maybe your thoughts on what we should do going forward. Obviously, we've got a couple of games against our old mates, Brighton and Wolves, coming up again, and we just need to see what front three you think we should be playing, and what you thought of Gakpo from the start as well.
Yeah, it's the front line's really difficult, because if say Arsenal, for instance, had the injuries that we've had in the front line, or Manchester United, if they had that, Rashford out, Rashford's been brilliant for them. If you had Rashford out, maybe one more. If there's plenty of teams who, if they'd lost the caliber of players that we've lost, would be probably in our position. Like, I think Diogo Jota has just been a massive loss and isn't spoken about enough, because I think that Liverpool at their best in terms of the front line, 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20 was Firmino in that sort of that central role. But So one of the things I've been doing when Liverpool have been so poor is going back on YouTube immediately after and watching old games, like old, against Roma and against City, and just basically trying to see like the difference between now and then. And what you see is like Firmino dropping in when Liverpool are defending, they're defending from the front with a three, they're swarming. Whenever it gets past and it's in the midfield area, Firmino's dropping in, he almost becomes like another midfielder whenever Liverpool are defending, and the entire team looks so compact, and that starts at the front and then it ends with a high line, and with Alisson able to sort of command the area behind that. And I think that's something that we've lost with this front line, is that Firmino doesn't have the legs. He can't do that every week, and he's not quite the calibre of player now's Firmino to be able to do that every single week. So Jota is probably the closest that we've got to him, and I think at different times this season, against Man City before he gets injured, against Ajax, these are the times when Liverpool have most looked like Liverpool, and it started with Jota sort of hunting from the front. So I think he's been a massive miss. Diaz as well. Like, Diaz was lucky. He comes in last season into a team that is flourishing and is vibrant and exciting, and you're able to drop him in here and there until he's ready to play, while Gakpo's come in and he's at this like disjointed football team around him that no one really looks as if they know what they're doing, and we don't really know what our identity is. So I feel a little bit sorry for Gakpo. I mean, he hasn't, I don't know what I was going to get from him, and he hasn't really shown. I think it's unfair to judge, is what I'm saying. Look, we've seen players take time to adjust and to get used to the system. How are you meant to get used to a system that's changing every week, and that players around them who have been there for years seemingly are unsure about what they're doing? I think it's a really difficult time to sort of ask Gakpo to, right, you're going to be the one that sort of drags us. And what was your other question? I've forgotten.
Well, just where you'd be putting Gakpo and Núñez at the moment, maybe who's on the left, who's through the middle, until we see the other three come back.
Well, Núñez, I mean, like I've really liked the look of Núñez. I think that we can see he isn't scoring enough of his chances, and that's been a problem throughout Liverpool's teams. I think him and Salah are top of the list of the most big chances missed, and we see that. We're seeing that every week. But I think what he does and what he offers is, this footballer that they're having to worry about, that frees up some space for Salah. He's a footballer that likes to get into the space in behind, and so that means teams have to sit deeper. Like against Brighton a few weeks ago, you're watching Brighton and they're able to have this big high line because Gakpo's not running in behind him, because that's not his game. So I'm excited to have Núñez back. I think the interesting thing about him is at times I've felt that he has been at his best and his most exciting and his most effective from the left. And so there's a thing I'd love to see, where I'd love to see more of Núñez in the left and maybe bring Salah inside, so he's more central, so he's getting in those spaces. Maybe go with Elliott. Elliott looked really good on the right against Wolves. Obviously it's Wolves, it's the cup. We stick him left, we're sticking him centre midfield. It's not really his position. I'd like to see him in his real position. And then you've got Gakpo to bring on. You've got, there's less onus on him to sort of be that main man, be that central sort of figure up top, because he that isn't his position really. So I mean, that's what I'd like to see over the next month or so. But I'm really, really excited for Diogo Jota to come back, and obviously Diaz further down the line.
No, absolutely. I think some of the comments being made about Gakpo online, and I think there's only 3 appearances, if I'm right on that. Absolutely bizarre, judging on that amount of minutes. And as you mentioned, it's a completely different context compared to the one that Luis Diaz arrived in. I hate having to bring this up. I mean, I only partially hate it because I think the discussion's interesting. But obviously we had Neil on last time, and he wrote a quite interesting blog on the ownership and his opinion on the ownership, and basically saying he doesn't really want to have to be thinking, let alone talking about the ownership. They should just be a distant figure that allows Liverpool to compete on the pitch. Quite interesting, of course, because I think as far as I'm aware, there's differing opinions on that even within the Anfield Wrap. So it's always interesting as far as debate. I suppose my question is, to what extent do you feel that the ongoing uncertainty that we have behind the scenes, to such an extent that we've seen key figures already announced the departing? Ian Graham's going. Julian Ward, who was just appointed sporting director, is going. So you've had key staff already announced their intention to leave. So turmoil behind the scenes, and then that's set against the backdrop of will they, won't they sell? Will they sell in parts? Will they even sell at all? Do we have to worry about a sale coming in the form of the dreaded Qatar petrostate investments and all the issues and trappings of obviously human rights violations, which no Liverpool fan wants to see, in complete contrast against the club and the city's values. To what extent, and again, I apologise, it's a loaded question. To what extent is all this difficulty behind the scenes, do you think? And is it at all having an impact on the pitch, on performance, on, you mentioned the mental side earlier, is it having an impact on that?
I think so. I think the thing that has been brilliant about Liverpool over the past 4 or 5 years has been there's been such certainty with everything that they've done. Even at times when, as fans, you're looking at it around, well, their transfer strategy, there's things that they've done at the time where I've not been in favour of. I remember it would have been 2017, the summer of 2017. We're not going to sign Van Dijk, and so they're saying we're not going to sign a centre back. And I was like, I can't believe they're going to go through the first half of the season without signing him. And so there's, but what they were steadfast in what they were doing was they knew that in January they'd be able to get Van Dijk, and they just needed to get through these 3 months. Selling Coutinho, I wasn't in favour of, but then they sell Coutinho, they buy Alisson, they're able to. It opens up new opportunities. That's just the transfer strategy side. In terms of the business, we, as fans, look, the only thing we see is from the outside, and we see the annual reports that the next one's coming out in a couple of weeks. It usually is in February, financial reports, and that'll be tasty because, again, same with the Deloitte Money League thing that come out recently, it sparks a massive debate around whether the owners are spending enough money, whether they're not, blah, blah, blah. I don't think they are, but I think it's gonna sort of seep into different aspects of the club. I think if you ask the players are saying now, we're on the pitch, we don't worry about the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, and maybe that's true. But I think certainly for Jürgen Klopp, if he's seeing staff members leave when 6 months earlier they've been announced in that role, well, I'm starting to think, well, what's going on? We've heard numerous sort of reports of medical staff leaving. Obviously you've mentioned there Ian Graham and different people that are part of the club's strategy on the pitch, and then they're leaving. That breeds uncertainty and it breeds worry, certainly within the fan base. So yes, I think it does. I think it can affect it. In terms of the ownership, I mean, where I've always stood with the ownership is I'll never love, I'll never like, I'll never think an ownership. This idea that I've always thought of this idea that FSG have come in and saved Liverpool is sort of bollocks, in that they are they're investors, they're businessmen. They're coming in. They've looked at this thing that has high potential value and is costing them very little at the time, and they're looking at the growth opportunities. They're looking at the experience that they've got, and they're thinking, how can I make more money in 5 years and 10 years? And if they sell, that's what they're about to do. So this idea that if someone buys FSG, I'm not going, oh, thanks very much for the past 5-6 years, thanks for this, thanks for that. I'm just not doing that. That's not It's Jürgen Klopp that has done a lot of this. But what has been brilliant is that in the background, Liverpool have been run really well. Look, at times I've wanted more money spent, and I think my argument has always been, as long as Jürgen Klopp seems happy with it, as long as it's in line with what Jürgen Klopp is wanting to do, and Liverpool are winning, then I'm happy. I'm not gonna, like, the summer that they don't sign anyone. Well, the summer of 2019, after we've won the European Cup, and we all think buy from a position of strength and all of this. I think they signed Harvey Elliott and Van den Berg or whatever. They win the league the following season. So there's not one part of me that's thinking, we should have signed someone then, because if you sign someone and they're brought on in that game against Villa when it's 1-0 Liverpool, and maybe they're brought on for Sadio Mane and maybe they don't win it, or if something like that happens, that there's a butterfly effect here that affects everything else that's happened after it. Same with the pandemic season was the pandemic season. It was mad, but there's still, we're talking about mentality. Liverpool found the mentality to, my God, it took goalkeeper scoring in the last minute, but they found a way to get themselves set up in the best possible position for the following season. I think with the ownership, I am often better the devil, and I think that when Liverpool are being run in the way that they're run, I'm happy with that part. I'm a bit concerned that this ownership don't seem to, if they're going to sell the club for 4 billion and they've bought it for a tenth of that or whatever it is, there's real opportunities there if they really cared, if they really wanted to, Liverpool to progress with this manager while we've got this manager, then there's real opportunities there to spend a little bit of their own money. But they've never done that. It's never been part of their model. They've never taken money out of the club, either. That's part of it. And the final thing I'd say on that is that they're trying to sell. They're acknowledging that they've maybe got Liverpool to the highest part that they possibly can get it to, and so they're trying to sell. There's a lot to talk. I could continue all day on that. I could talk about the protests that are happening, that were meant to happen at the weekend. There's just so much within the ownership question that there's just so much to sort of to talk about within it.
Oh, there's so much to unpack, isn't there?
Is that, yeah. Well, we had the Boston Red Sox and the Pittsburgh Penguins fan on the other day. Obviously, we all share the same owners, and as critical as you were then of John Henry and FSG, I can assure you the Boston Red Sox fan was a little bit more critical. So, I think he's quite universally held in the same opinion by most of the clubs that he owns. So, it's certainly an interesting one. But obviously, that's not just to plug us, but just I think, as you said, he has the way he runs a club, and it's worked for us. It's just when it's not working as well as it does, and where we are now, you start looking at things, don't you? And I think, as Fradl touched on, the stuff behind the scenes is probably the most odd, and that people are talking the least about. Like, we went months without a head club doctor, and we don't know what's going on with the recruitment. I've just done an article then on the loan system. We had 19 players sent out in the summer, and 40% of them are already back at the club. So it's like, who's in charge of the recruitment now? It all seems to be going a bit strange, doesn't it? But yes, as you said, there's a lot of subjects we can spend a lot of time on. So I'll before we go back to the Jürgen documentary, I'll maybe put you on the spot again one last time. How do you think the season's going to end? You touched on goal scoring goalkeepers before, and we found a way, and the mentality monsters. How far can we go this season? Champions League, Premier League, what's going to happen?
The most worrying thing about all of this is I don't know. Like, usually I'd be saying, well, this is Liverpool, and there's always that possibility of winning the European Cup. I think it looks as if that we just look like a shade of what we've been in the past, and what potentially we're trying to be, and that's the most worrying thing for me. I think that season, the pandemic season, there were key reasons why that was happening, and that was defensive injuries, and there was a story you could tell yourself, right? Well, when we get the Van Dijk back, and when we get Gomez and Matip back, it'll improve. I think this season, maybe the Jota, the Diaz thing, but then, there's problems in midfield. I'd love Liverpool to buy a midfielder. I would absolutely love the football club to give themselves the best possible chance to try and give everyone a lift. I'm going to say Liverpool draw against Brighton, just because there's another cup replay. We're almost certainly going to have another cup replay, and Jürgen Klopp won't like it at all. I think we might win the FA Cup if we go through. I know it sounds like a mad thing. I just think we might do it. It might be one of these things that just feels like, I was at the Wolves game, and it just felt, I really enjoyed it because it felt like something different. I was watching new fellas that hadn't burnt my head out for the past few weeks. I was watching a team in a cup with proper jeopardy, and maybe something like that, maybe a cup like that might save the season. My God, I'd do anything for a run in the European Cup. I'd do anything to win at the Bernabeu. I'd do anything to knock them out after the European Cup final. But it's a little bit more pessimism than there usually would be at this stage.
But we've never retained the FA Cup, so Jürgen Klopp likes making history. So why not? That can be this season. The job ticked, and then next year we'll just win it all again instead.
Well, no, I mean, Madrid seems a daunting prospect right now, but we won't go into that too much. Just to wrap things up, of course, you mentioned about episode 4. You mentioned about a mysterious interview coming up. We won't press you further on the identity of that individual that we'd sorely love to. Could you just tell us, I suppose, what can we broadly expect from episode 4 and going forward, and any sort of final thoughts on the documentary?
I think if you've watched episodes 1, 2, and 3, or even just 1, I think what you can see is it's stories by people that you have never seen before, you've never heard from before. It's stories of people who have were his friends or his teammates or his coaches. These are stories that people haven't told and have never been asked to tell, and that was the most exciting thing at the beginning when Fuad and the team were going through and looking for new people to speak to. They were constantly finding another new person in Germany to speak to at Mainz or at one of his clubs in Frankfurt whenever he was a semi-professional footballer. So expect more stories you've never heard. Expect more stories that give you a bit of more of an insight into Jürgen Klopp, the person, throughout different times of his career. I think there's there's a couple of really, really good stories that just will make you laugh, but you wouldn't expect anything different from about Jürgen Klopp. And yeah, expect some bigger names as well in the last two parts, because as I said, it's about it's about winning things. It's about winning a European Cup with Liverpool. It's about winning the Premier League. It's about a historic season last season. So you need some faces and voices from during that time as well. So there'll be a bit of that. But yeah, look, we're really, really happy with how it sort of finished off. We wanted to, as I say, sort of set a new benchmark. You mentioned the other fan media channels and likes of yourselves. Like, I think one of the things that I've always been really, really proud of is that Liverpool's sort of Liverpool Football Club's fan culture and sort of identity within the online world or within the fan media world or whatever has always been really, really strong. There's always been brilliant content out there, and that only just makes the others. If someone does something, then I know from the Anfield Drap's point of view, we want to go and do something bigger and better. And so we've aimed for this to be the best it possibly could be, as I said earlier, and I think people will really enjoy it. Episode 3 was just my absolute favorite. It was, I just thought it was incredible. And episode 4 and 5 will be all the fun bits. So it'll be brilliant.
Fantastic stuff. A love letter to Jürgen Klopp, and the main man himself has seen the documentary, which is, has to be an incredibly proud moment for the team, and entirely well deserved. So we'll be very much looking forward to seeing these episodes when they come out. As you mentioned, I believe episodes 2 and 3 will be coming free, available on YouTube in the near future. So I'm sure everyone will be keeping their eyes on that if they haven't already seen the episodes. And episode 4 then following. This has been the Empire of the Cop podcast. We've had the Anfield Wrap's Craig Hannan on board today. Piece of Kenny Jones as usual, of course, and myself, Farrell Keeling. Stay tuned for more and take care.